Either turn it off or silence it. Today is Wednesday, August 21st, 2019, and the regular session at Oregon City Commission come to order. Call the roll, please.
Commissioner Rachel Lyle Smith. Here. Commissioner Frank O'Donnell.
Here.
Commissioner Rocky Smith.
Here.
Commissioner Denise McGriff.
Present.
And Mayor Dan Holliday.
Here. Please stand and join me in the flags. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So I'm going to make a couple of changes to the agenda. We're going to take the item 7C, the Buena Vista Clubhouse first, followed by the guaranteed maximum price for the police station. Then we'll come back to the public hearing. Do we have any citizen comment?
We do. We have William Gifford.
Mr. Gifford.
Mr. Mayor and City Commissioners, my name is William Gifford and I live in Oregon City. I had two things. One is I wanted to remind the commission that next Tuesday is the OCBA forum, and the speakers are from some pretty high-powered talkers about the opportunity zones in Oregon City. And I noticed one or two of you have already signed up. I appreciate that, and I think that you'll get a lot out of that. That's at 11:30 next Tuesday. They can go to ocbusinessalliance.com. Tonight, I think, is the last night. They'll shut that off tomorrow. And coincidentally, and I wasn't planning on this, I had thought that Commissioner Lyle Smith had asked for some bottle bags at the concerts in the park. It turned out that she didn't need any, but I do have some bottle bags. These bags are used by the Oregon City Parks Foundation as fundraisers. We have these strategically placed all over the city. Would you like one?
I would like one, sure.
I'd be happy to give you one. Anyone else would like one?
I need some extra ones for my workout studio.
Excellent.
We're already collecting them there, but I could use extras.
Yeah, well, they tend to fill up pretty fast. So, thank you very much.
Okay, anyone else on public comment? Then we will go to the Buena Vista Clubhouse. Mr. Lewis.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The PowerPoint.
Do it. Oh, excuse me. I'm not quite on it yet.
So, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Today, we are going to be speaking a little bit about the Buena Vista Clubhouse. At the direction of Commission, recently requested that we go back and find more detailed estimations of construction costs to bring the house from its current condition into a usable public community space. First, I'd like to give a little bit of the history of the site for those that are unaware. And with that, I'd like to invite up Karen Morey from the Friends of the Buena Vista Clubhouse to give a little background on the history of the house. First off, before Karen gets started, just location of the park. As a reminder, it's located at the intersection of Jackson and 16th Street. Little over 1,000 square feet, community meeting space with the main meeting room, small kitchen space, and a single-user restroom. And I'll turn it over to Karen.
One of my 3-minute history lessons. The Buena Vista area used to be called Kansas City. There is a ravine that runs near 14th Street with a very deep creek in it, which cut Oregon City in half, like Kansas City is cut in half by the river. You had to travel down to Washington Street in order to reach any of the other areas of Oregon City if you lived up in this area. In 1889, the Atkinson family platted part of the property. In 1896, they platted the additional property, basically going from Division Street down to past Madison, and from 18th back to 14th. In 1923, there were very few houses in the area, but the area began to develop primarily because the mill workers were buying cars. And 1923, there was a very large flood, so what was called Greenpoint down near the river had flooded for the second time in about 30 years. And the mill workers moved up onto the hill and rapidly expanded that neighborhood. In February 1923, a civic improvement organization was formed for the purpose of raising funds to purchase property for a park. At that point, there were three park properties in the city. McLaughlin House had been moved to one park. The library had been built in another park. And where the pool is now was a semi-developed park area, and that was it for parks in this area. They purchased, it might have been number, they purchased 29 lots, partially from the Atkinson family and also from a couple private owners. They raised $2,000 to pay off the properties. And in 1927, they gave the deeds of the park to the city, creating Atkinson Memorial Park. The club continued to meet regularly. They came to the city not only to give, but to ask for sewers to be installed, water to be installed, street lights. They paid for and created their own street signs and had them installed. The biggest issue was what was called the Madison Street Bridge, which was near 14th and Madison. It was an old wooden bridge that was dangerous, and they petitioned the city to replace it with a concrete bridge. And over the years, they repeatedly had to come back to the city to repair that bridge, which actually gave them access to the city at Madison Street. In 1930, gotta go back to the right note here. In 1930, one of their members offered a house that belonged to his brother to move to the property to use as a clubhouse. Up until then, they were meeting in each other's homes, and they wanted a place to meet. The brother, John Surface, donated his house, which was moved by 2 horses from right there. It was sitting in what is now the parking lot. You were sitting in the backyard of the original house, up to the current location in Atkinson Park. It served as a meeting place for the Civic Improvement Group, which in effect was the first ever neighborhood association in Oregon City, and one of the most active and one of the most successful. They started a boys band. They started a band that eventually moved to the high school. In 1928, they formed their Art Needle Craft Club, which continued for 38 years. They started a junior stamp club in 1950 and held stamp displays there. The clubhouse was available to members to rent at $2.50 a night. They had birthday parties, anniversary parties, neighborhood dinners, and the only thing they couldn't do is serve hard alcohol. They also held flea markets and rummage sales to raise funds, which they donated to the senior center, the school orchestra, and other civic organizations. That clubhouse was the heart of that neighborhood that for 70 some odd years was active, engaged in the community. And, basically something like the McLaughlin House, Ermatinger House, the structure is significant. The Buena Vista Clubhouse is a late 1880s, early 1890s home that was reconfigured to become a public meeting space. But it was the heart of a community. It's the story that it brings that we feel is important, and we feel that the loss of that building is a loss to Oregon City's story.
Cool picture. So to follow up with Karen's history lesson, in 1930 again, was moved to the current location. So we have a picture of the house in 1930 and then another picture of the house around 1970. So one of the other points of consideration for the conversation has been needing to move it from its current condition into a position where it can be used as a public space. So at the request of Commissioner McGriff, we've asked the building official to be here in 2018, he wrote a letter, a memo to myself to detail what would be required to bring the house out of red tag status, and I'll turn it over to Mr. Roberts to discuss a little bit further.
Thank you. I'm the building official, Mike Roberts, for the City of Oregon City. Mr. Mayor, Commissioners, as Mr. Lewis was just saying, him and I met on January 30th of 2018 to discuss the building. And I followed up with a letter on February 5th of that year to address the items that needed to be corrected to open the building back up or to be able to use the building. The first requirement, probably the most significant, was that a registered design professional do a structural analysis of the building. And that has been done. And the other items I had was items such as access for accessibility, interior environment such as heat, cooling, fire life safety, which would be egress illumination, exit signs, be brought up to current code. The electrical system looked at, which was completed in, I think, May of this year. A permit was taken out, and that's been done. I should say. There was a new service panel put in one circuit, so they could at least start using power there. And then the plumbing system be brought up to current code. Those are the basic items, and I received a preliminary plan from Todd Island, who is a registered design professional here in town and has the qualifications to do this. And everything he's proposed, which is probably 80% of those items, have been addressed and could work towards this project. There's a few things that still need to be worked out, but it's a very small list.
So with that information, again, Mr. Island provided a set of documents for us to use as a base point for cost estimations. Mr. Island and his firm conducted one set of cost estimations based on his design and measurements that were provided. We contacted a secondary firm to provide a secondary analysis of the estimates. With that, we received from ACC Cost Consultants an estimate for the development of the property into a usable condition. So with those two cost estimates, again, what you see in front of you is a summary of the materials that were provided in your packet. For the construction costs, Mr. Island estimate that the cost would be roughly $286,000 for just construction. ACC cost estimates came back at $457,000. On top of that, again, looking at architectural and engineering services, permitting, we also looked at a one-year cost indexing based on conversations with Mr. Island and ACC Cost Consultants. Approximately 7% is the current cost indexing for construction year to year. And so with that, based on the construction documents, we would have roughly $382,000 for Island's estimates, roughly $611,000 for ACC cost estimates. Again, the reality is the drawings are preliminary. The true expense will probably be somewhere in the middle, but we are very confident in ACC cost estimates has provided regionally that is all they do is cost estimates for construction projects. Mr. Island has used them for previous projects. The city has used them for projects, and they're fairly dialed in on their numbers. I would say that they did not come out to do a physical inspection of the house, and so using the documents that were provided by Mr. Island, they gave a cost estimate based on that information. So there is going to be some wiggle room based on their estimations. I had follow-up conversation with the engineer that provided the estimates, and he said that there would be probably some wiggle room with that, plus or minus 10% based on, again, the current documents and then moving into a actual construction set for construction. So the other thing that we're going to look at, so what we have in front of you on the slide is a cost if we were to, again, complete the whole project in this next calendar year. If we were to look at more of a phased approach, you're going to be looking at some additional costing for phasing it out, additionally compounded costing index for construction, and again, a larger cost estimate for the full scope of the project. In conversations with the Friends Group, there are things that we can do in the short term to get the house up and habitable as laid out by the building official. There are other things that we could do later, but what you're looking at is probably a true sense of what the actual cost of maintaining the house would be. So there's things like the current roof might not need to be fully replaced this year, but it eventually, and more than likely in the next couple of years, will need to be replaced. So that's a cost that we could, break off that piece, complete it at a later date. And there are some of those items that are, that could be included in a later phased approach. But each chunk that you break off, there is an additional expense for mobilization, additional expense for indexing to move the project out further. And as we're finding with the current construction market is that a lot of firms aren't willing to bid on smaller projects, or if they are, they bump the price up because it's not worth it for them unless they get a good price point on it. So just take those things into consideration. Again, these are all just numbers that have been provided based on the information that we have. Once we get dialed into the project a little bit more, if it's of interest to the commission to move forward, we'll be developing a true construction document set, have a little bit more of a refinement of the numbers and know what we'll be able to do moving forward. But these give you a rough estimate of the numbers that we will be looking at. With that, I would like to invite up a couple members of the Friends Group to discuss further, Damon Mabey and Todd Island.
So while they're coming up, can I ask Mr. Rogers a question about the cost estimate? So did you look at the ACC estimate or only the Iceland?
I believe I've seen both of them.
You've seen both of them, and you said that the Iceland you thought would only get about 80% of the things needed?
No, I'm sorry. The plans that I saw yesterday, the preliminary plans covered about 80% of the items that needed, the minimum items to open the building back up. Not the cost. I was just talking about the code-related items.
So I just want to make sure I understand. So there's additional things that need to be added to these cost estimates in order to get it up to code?
No, not the cost estimates. I'm speaking strictly on the fire life safety items. The egress lights weren't shown, or the exit signs. Also, the accessible parking outside wasn't shown. So a lot of the items were there, but there was a few items still missing. So that's what I was saying, is these are preliminary plans. And most of them had been addressed, most of the items.
Mr. Mabey?
Good evening, Mayor and Commissioners. Damon Mabey, City of Oregon City. Just to kind of piggyback on that, that's essentially the difference. The specific line items weren't addressed as, the egress lights, the kitchen facilities, that sort of stuff. But essentially they're there. The thing that I'd like to talk about and take much less time than a full thing, but is that what we're looking forward to is trying to get this building up and running again. And the very minimums to do that is to make sure it's got a solid foundation, and it doesn't require an entire foundation. That's a wish list from the city. It just needs to have the piers inspected and maybe a couple of them replaced or strengthened. And it needs to have the bathrooms put back in because the bathrooms all the fixtures were taken out of the original bathroom. So that means it's now a remodel and it needs to be brought up to code, which means you need 2 bathrooms and they need to be ADA compliant, which means the kitchen needs to go because that's where the second bathroom goes. But the reality of it is that's all that needs to happen to get the building up and running, is to make sure the foundation's secure and have ADA bathrooms. We do need to work, and I was just gonna say, and we need to at least get some form of ADA access in. And Phil and I have been going back and forth about, I think the easiest way is to take down one of the trees, which is way too close to the building, or we have to go way out and around it to do the access. But things like the roof, the you know, the kitchen facility, if it is going to be redone, are all things that can be done in the future. The windows being reglazed, you know, those are all things that can happen after the building is up and running and starting to at least generate some revenue and getting recognized. Right now, it's just this white lump on the side of the park. And so, you know, that's our goal. And one of the things that would help us with that is if the city would allow Tony or instruct Tony to sign off on our request to have the building historically designated. All we're asking is that we are able to submit the application and that it runs through the process. Goes to the Historic Review Board, they make their decision, you know, and it moves on. Yes, that does give the, obligate the city to a certain extent, but the reality of it is you're already obligated for it. The building is already city property. You're already supposed to be taking care of it. You know, the addition of you really need to take care of it instead of just you ought to take care of it is really the only change. Even if it's historically designated, you can still demolish it if that's, you know, your choice in the future. And then the other thing that I would like to say is a lot of those costs are if some firm, you know, some major developer wants to come in and do the job. I think there's a lot of opportunity for public-private partnerships. I just had my roof redone, literally like 3 hours ago. They just finished. I talked with the company, and they said, "Well, we might be interested in you know, stepping up and doing something. Maybe you pay for the materials, but we pay for the roofers. You know, we pay the labor, or something even more than that, depending on what the season is. You know, we're always trying to keep crews together. So if something happens at December, you know, there's 5 great days, boom, no cost." So anyway, that's the sort of stuff that I think if we look at, there's a lot of opportunities there.
Mr. Isley?
Thank you for having us here. We would like to see the building preserved. It's designated in your comp plan as a significant recreation facility or a major recreation facility. On page 57 of your comp plan, we see that as one more reason to keep this building as a viable, active community center and rehab it. But we're not really asking for the funding right now. What we're looking for is just the authorization to have this go before the Historic Review Board, so then we can have opportunity for additional funds. Our office has donated services and will continue to donate services for this. We're, you know, the 71,485 up there, you could get rid of that number. The comparison between the two cost estimates, there are some pretty significant differences, mostly in the demolition. There's not much demolition required. ACC made some assumptions that there were mechanical systems in place to be demolished. There's not. There is no plumbing to be demolished. It's already been done. The electric has already been updated and taken care of. So the actual number for renovating the structure is much less than either one of these numbers you're seeing, to get it to a usable condition where it could generate revenue and support itself.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
These estimates are predicated upon making it a viable meeting space. Is there another set of expenses where all our goal is to make it representative of what it was during the years when it was active, but not make it a meeting space? A preservation type thing, like say there's log cabins out there, we don't bring them up to current status, we preserve them in their original. Is there an approach to that that's feasible? And if so, I imagine those costs would be significantly different than what we see here.
I don't think this building warrants, you know, spending $500-600 a square foot. I don't think anyone would agree to that. I don't think it's a landmark building like an early settlement cabin that would be worth preserving as a museum piece. It really should be an active, you know, asset for the community. There are other facilities in West Lynn that rent for $50 to $80 an hour that are full most of the year. They pay for their upkeep and improvements. I think this facility could do that. It has done that in the past.
Oh, I believe in the past, has it not generated, was it $3,400 annually?
Correct, right around there,
So,
3,000.
I mean, you know,
Cover the power.
yeah, I mean, as an economic proposition, I don't see it. I don't view this as a potential meeting space because there's other more economical ways to accomplish that.
Commissioner Smith?
How much money the building generates has to do with how much staff markets it and how much staff utilizes it. The same argument could have been made for the trolleys, where we didn't charge people to ride the trolley, and we didn't make any money back on it, because it wasn't something we decided to do. So I think we've already been told that these numbers are not accurate, or not needed at this time for what it takes to just open the building. We definitely have the ability to open the building for considerably less and see how it goes. I don't think any of us are going to demolish the building, but I think, you know, we have some obligation. We have all the obligation to take care of it. It's also pretty amazing, the history of this building was about a group who raised money for the city. Giving money to the city, giving money to the schools, and it's our building now. We don't want to put a dime into it. It's just unbelievable. And without going into great detail, the fact that someone in the city at some point red tagged it with absolutely no proof of reason for doing so, which we have yet to see, and also at some point went in and started removing facilities, is unbelievable. And so if the only thing we can do to counteract those huge mistakes is to just save the building, then that's what I think we should do. And I think that, just to make a point, Saturday is Oregon City's celebration of 175 years as a city. And we like to tout our amazing history as a city, and we like to tout our amazing gift at historic preservation. And let me tell you, we do a lousy job at both. And let's just take responsibility for once for our buildings. So I'll make a motion to direct the city manager to write a letter of support to designate this building as a historic structure.
Well, I'll second it, but I reserve the right to have some conversation continue.
Okay.
Did you want to say anything? I really would like to go last, if I may, besides Dan, if you have something else you want to add to this.
Oh, well, yeah, I thought we were in a discussion, but now there's a motion on the table.
Well, we're
Still in
still in
So
discussion.
we'll still discuss.
Mr. Lewis, can you please clarify the direction that was given to Mr. Iceland, his company, as far as providing a cost estimate in ACC versus what Mr. Maybe is saying? Did you not, can you just clarify the directions of what that cost estimates that you asked them to provide versus maybe one that hasn't come before us yet, which sounds like a different version of this?
Yeah, so staff worked with Mr. Iceland representing the Friends Group and being a licensed architect in the state to develop a set of in-progress drawings to allow for an estimation to occur. So Mr. Iceland utilized Mr. Roberts' memo letter stating these are the things that need to happen to get the house out of red tag status and to be occupiable for a public meeting space. We met with Mr. Iceland to go through the items that we knew would be of benefit to the city in the long term. Staff's position is that if we're going to invest in the house, instead of putting a Band-Aid on the foundation and then need to come back later, that we probably should just bite the bullet. If it's worth saving and preserving in the long term, we probably should just put a full foundation on it, instead of paying for it once and then paying for it again a second time some years later. There were other items that were included that the city recognizes needing to happen at some point moving forward, whether it's immediately at the time of construction to open it up to the public, or within a couple of years, knowing the wear and tear on the building and items that would need to happen in the long term to preserve the building. So that would include, we had conversations about refinishing the hardwood floors. They're not in the best of condition. They would need to happen before we open in order to preserve the wood floors and not have further damage occur. So those kinds of things that we could possibly phase out, but everything that is listed are items, and I'll let Mr. Eisen speak for himself for the process, but there are items that through conversations, we developed a shared scope and understanding of these are things that make a lot of sense. We might be able to pull a few things off the list, but these are all things that will need to happen to preserve the building.
So it seems to me that, once again, we're getting the cart before the horse. And that is that we still don't have what I would consider realistic. I need to know what exactly it is that you want to do and how much that's going to cost. And I have a personal bias because I worked in the construction industry for 30 years. Typically, architects are very optimistic people. Construction people are very pragmatic. So when I look at those estimates, I tend to lean towards the ACC number, not towards Mr. Eisler's number, and that's nothing about you in particular, Todd. Until we have some better idea of what the costs are going to be and it's not just the cost, but it's the benefit analysis as well. I find it difficult to believe with the amount of meeting space we have in the city that this is really necessary. And my charge is not to be, this or that or the other thing. My charge is to be a good steward of the public's money. And $500,000 could easily be spent in a lot of different ways just in our park system. So I have to rate those things, and I am not willing to put this send it started down the road to the historic register until we have a better idea of what it is that we're trying to do.
The conversation tonight was somewhat enlightening to me. If the goal is to make this a public meeting space and usable, that's reflected in these costs. I question if we were just trying to preserve it as a historical exhibit, which would probably be a whole different set of criteria as far as usability. Much like the mayor, this commission is faced with unlimited demands and limited funds. And I asked myself, what else could I do for the entire community with this sum of money? Ownership, the city owns it, and as such, the city could disposition it if they so wished. I come from a very historical area, Pennsylvania, one of the 13 original colonies. I've seen many restorations, and I've seen many areas where what commemorates the event is a beautiful bronze plaque, and, here one stood. So I would temper my response with all those thoughts. And once again, I struggle with these estimates for the same reason you stated. And I quite honestly don't want to start down any path until we have clarity as what is it we want to do. If the goal is to make this a public meeting place, that's not efficient. If the goal is to preserve this as a historical exhibit, that's a different matter to me. But I don't see it as a viable economic proposition to try to restore it as a public meeting place. That's not what this is about.
Mr. Losbeth?
I don't know that I have much else to add. I would agree with Mr. Mayor. I would like for us to have a clearer picture of where we're going, and I understand what Commissioner O'Donnell was saying. I don't believe this is about public meeting space, so This is more about it being like a community center or a gathering center, or recognizing it as a historic place. And I agree, there's a lot of ways to recognize a place, for its historical contribution to the city, so.
Commissioner McGriff?
Taking a deep breath. So first of all, I want to say that, to concur with Mr. Island, that it is in our comprehensive plan on page 58. It's under major recreational facilities in the city of Oregon City, and I quote, Buena Vista Clubhouse, owned and maintained by Parks and Recreation. The Buena Vista Clubhouse at 1601 Jackson Street houses recreational programs and is available for community rentals. The Friends Group is asking for the designation to recognize its historic significance because, again, some of us thought it already was designated because it was owned by the city and we knew about the history of the site. Number two, it is currently still part of the park system, and it was unfortunate of the things that happened to it, but again, we still have an obligation as a city commission to maintain our park properties, and this property has had deferred maintenance and almost was demolished because we weren't paying attention. Some of us out in the audience that day were paying attention, but that's why it's still here. It is a viable meeting space. It has been a viable meeting space, and it's a community meeting space. It can be utilized again, and it had been in the past, and I believe strongly that it can pay for itself. I also have experience with construction, and as a matter of fact, on many occasions, as a project manager for the Portland Development Commission, I hired ACC. They are not a construction firm. They do estimates, and we use them primarily for value engineering. So when we had our construction estimates, we asked them to take a look at it. When I saw these numbers, I was very disappointed because, number one, I know that they didn't take into consideration all the things that had been done because they probably didn't know that. And we weren't comparing the same things that the estimates that Todd Island was given. And I know, and I'm not criticizing staff, but yes, I probably would have added all the wish list items that I wanted to have in this because that's what you need to do. But there is an issue with ongoing maintenance and lack thereof. And so sometimes staff thinks that anything beyond painting a wall is considered a capital expense, which is where we are now because of the stuff being taken out. I feel very strongly that this building can again be a viable meeting space, not in the venture of City Hall or the pool or the community center, the Pioneer Community Center, but it is a size that people are looking for. We've had weddings there, there've been picnics there, we have a history of use there of people utilizing a small space, something that was affordable, and again, it can help pay for itself. The Friends Group has already had a cleanup. We're in the process of planning our third fundraiser to help with funds for this particular project. And we are looking for the opportunity to apply for other funding. And that's again why the designation is so important. Because we have access to a pool of money that is not available otherwise. I really want to thank Phil for getting what he had so far, but again, I wish ACCs hadn't been included because I think it's an unrealistic expectation when the number may somewhere be in between the 382 and the 611, but I don't think it's 611. Again, to reiterate what my fellow committee members in the audience have said, is that it can be reutilized. It can be brought back into service. It's not merely a place that we want to put a plaque up because we know what happens to places with plaques. That's not really what we're looking for. Sure, we'd like to have a plaque on it to say that it's a designated structure. But to tear it down and to just put a plaque saying this was there, that's not historic preservation. I think it runs counter to what Oregon City stands for and our preservation program. I really would like to ask you all to support Rocky's motion so we can do one tiny little step. If you think that there's more work to be done beyond what will take this out of red tag status, then that's what we were asked to do. That's what they were asked to do. That is what they did. People in this community are working very hard to support this building and support the city and give back to the city in a way that is productive and conducive to what Oregon City stands for as the first city.
Commissioner Smith?
Putting a plaque outside of a building is not our obligation in taking care of our facilities. We wouldn't do it for any other building in this city. Our obligation is to take care of our facilities. And we do a lousy job. We do such a lousy job that it gets to the point that we have to get to this conversation. And don't think that's not deliberate. This was deliberate over the last 5-10 years, completely deliberate. And all they're asking is to put this on the register, okay? None of us are demolishing this building. None of us have, I mean, if anyone made a motion tonight to demolish this building, would this commission vote for it? I don't think so. Maybe I'm wrong. I guess that's a good question to ask. Is there anyone up here that would propose to demolish it tomorrow? Because if not, then we're already saying that building needs to stay there, okay? So then what do? Just let it sit there? I mean, if we're not demolishing it, we're saving it. There's two choices. So I guess I'd like to know, those are the two choices, demolish it or save it. There's no in between.
Well, I guess I would say,
I'm
I
not
think that there are
finished.
folks who are
Not
considering
Not
demolishing
finished.
it.
This group of citizens, in like so many other examples, when the city is not doing their job, has had to step up to take over. And they're not even really expecting us to fill this bill. They're just asking us to put it on the radar so they can get money to fill this. And I can tell you what, if we acknowledge that importance of just the building not being demolished, even if we don't spend a penny, I'm sure that within 3 or 5 years, this group is gonna raise that money. But not if we say no tonight. Not if we keep trying to, stop progression from a group that's really trying to do good. I looked even last night on a couple grants for not even this project, state grants, all sorts of preservation grants that are out there that will give money to state and local agencies, local governments or this, but they're not gonna do it unless we write that letter. I will, call, is there a second to my motion, first of all?
Rachel has something she wants to say, though.
Okay, and then,
And there may be somebody
I'll
else
run
who
the
can
meeting, thank you.
testify.
I guess my point is after, so there is no second yet.
I did
Yes, she
second.
did second it.
So I think the conversation should continue before, I'll let that happen. I think that should happen before the call for the vote. But I guess my response would be, if you are on this commission tonight and you are not willing to make that motion, then make a motion tonight to demolish the building.
Smith?
People who want to speak, so.
Thank you. I was trying to provide an answer to Commissioner Smith's question, and I'm going to say what nobody's been willing to vocalize is I think that is one of the consideration of demolishing the building. If we're talking about public meeting space, we can build a 1,000-foot, community center for a lot less money than $800,000. The cost estimate that ACC provided had a whole 2 paragraphs of things of costs that were not included in that cost estimate. So if ACC is correct, I anticipate that the cost of refurbishing this building and bringing it up to standards is going to be much higher than their estimate. And it potentially could be that. And the fact is you don't know. What I have heard is the stories of the McLaughlin House and how that project
No, Ermitinger, I think.
Ermitinger House, yes, got more and more expensive. It just went up and up and up. It was higher than the original cost estimates. It's kind of opening a can of worms. I will say that when I was considering something, if it were demolished, I wasn't thinking of just a little plaque. I was thinking more of if we were trying to come up with something to recognize it historically, that it would be something much better than just a here lied a building plaque, like an interpretive thing or something that kind of went through the history that Ms. Maury went over earlier with some exhibits. There's quite a number of things you could do there that would recognize the historical significance of a building that has truthfully no architectural significance when compared to other historical homes in the area. So I just wanted to put it out there. I think we are considering demolishing it. That is an
Make a
option.
motion.
No. We
But
better,
I don't know that we're there yet. We've been in this collect information phase for a while. I'll leave it at that.
Commissioner O'Donnell.
I don't think we're there yet either. I think,
Yeah.
there's this part of me that says it doesn't make economic sense to me to say I want to use this as a meeting place. I am willing to say, hey, let's preserve it in its former glory as far as this is what it looked like at that point in time. I don't know if that needs to meet code requirements. At that point, it becomes an exhibit. But then I listened to the gentleman here, and he says there's no, if I understood you correctly, there's no real reason to do that as an architectural exhibit. And I know and agreeing with Commissioner Lyle Smith, it stated it does, it's architecturally, redeeming values are almost non-existent. And even the SHPA says that it was more a cultural thing than an
Building
architectural thing.
significance is a cultural, and it's
Right.
no different than.
Yeah.
Right, and I
Grange
understand
halls.
that.
We've done restorations of numerous Grange halls throughout the state. They're viable, self-sufficient, self-supporting after they're restored. They are vibrant and they retain that use.
But I would agree with Commissioner Lyle Smith that if I was interested in a meeting place, I could go buy a prefabricated shell and plunk it down there and I'd have what I needed, brand new, done and done.
But these
That's
places
not
are
what the goal is.
desirable for weddings and events like that.
One at a time, please. Okay, Mr. Conkle.
Yes, sir.
The key question here is, if we were to, say, have this thing, start out having it designated, say it was designated, what kind of extra responsibilities does that put on the city at that point?
Does it limit our options?
But that, I know that we have for historic structures a demolition by neglect provision for the upkeep of the facility. Moving forward, if they did choose to demolish it, at that point, you'd be working through the State Historic Preservation Office.
Well, it depends on if we're talking about a local designation or a national register designation, but we'd either be working through the State Historic Preservation Office or we'd be doing a demo review here at the local level through the HRB.
And so, one of the outcomes of that could be some type of interpretation associated with the demolition of the building, so it'd be those, trying to identify what those mitigating requirements would be for the demolition of the building. So,
No, I think you missed my point.
Okay.
My question is, what does that obligate, if it were designated, what does it obligate the city to do?
well, I think we'd probably, let's just say we did nothing. I think that as a designated structure, we do have in our code a demolition by neglect, which at some point, I would argue could potentially be applicable. I'm not sure that we've used that in quite a while.
We have.
we have,
We have used the demolition by neglect process.
so we do
and,
it ourselves.
If the building official does deem a building to be,
Thank you. If it hasn't been maintained and it is been neglected to the point where, it's falling apart, then the building official would indicate that, and the Historic Review Board would then go through a code enforcement process, essentially, work with the property owner to either figure out a plan to remedy the situation, or eventually potentially approve an actual demolition of the building. But either way, that has to go through that public process with the Historic Review Board.
And that's for locally designated structure.
for locally designated structures.
Do you mind if I pose the question one more time?
Go ahead.
Is there no middle ground where we restore this to the point of being a historical artifact, but not trying to use it as a meeting place? Where people can view it, see it for what it was, but not worry about using it for occupancy? Yes, is that a yes, head nod?
So the minimum requirements that I gave was based on a meeting space. If it was gonna be utilized for something else, the minimum requirements would go way down. And it would be a lot,
So if,
those cost estimates.
so if the people were gonna actually go inside, you don't have to worry about the plumbing, you don't have to worry about, you obviously still need to have some heat in the building to prevent mold and that sort of thing.
You have to have air movement, not necessarily heat.
Okay.
But like I say, potentially, depending upon the use that you want it to be used as, the requirements change drastically.
Okay, well, we have 3 citizen comments, so if you guys won't mind. Karen Maury and Dorothy Dalsford.
Hello, Dee Dee. Okay, so Rocky and Denise both sort of touched on this, but I think we've just spent a lot of time going down the country lane. The Friends group would like to be able to reach out to find the funds to restore this building. The ultimate use of the building, once restored, is not determined. Yes, it would be nice to return it to full use, but that's down the road. That's way down the road. The local designation, and by the way, it technically is an historical structure locally. It is an late 1880s house. There are hundreds of them in this neighborhood. Well, no, 30, 40?
Maybe 20.
Okay, there are multiple examples of that house style in the McLaughlin neighborhood that are already locally designated. So, in effect, it should have been anyway. It's just the fact that it had been altered and put to a different use. What the Friends need to go out and ask for grant money is to have the designation and to have a sense that the commission is favorable to restoration. What it is restored to can be discussed later because it is park department property. It'll be up to the park how it is utilized. But without the designation and without a consensus that some restoration will occur, we can't go ahead and try to raise funds, try to create the public private partnership that Damon referred to. We can't apply for grants. As long as there's any uncertainty, we cannot move forward trying to find that money. It would be lovely for you to write the check, feel free. And I do have to say that as a grant writer, I love that ACC estimate. It's going to make it lovely to go out and ask for money.
Dorothy?
And to come in under budget and on time.
Name for...
My name is Dorothy Dalsford. I live in Oregon City. I actually live in a turn-of-the-century home. This is the reason why I felt I needed to step forward. I also have 22 years in construction prior to marketing and sales and in Oregon City, mainly concrete foundation construction. So I do know that end of the construction field. This is a post and pillar home. It doesn't need to have a full foundation. You can still have however many people are legally in. You can put in a 1,000 square foot home. I don't know if that's 40 or 50 or 60. I just don't know. So I don't want to speak out of turn. However, post and pillar is the new movement. It is coming back in a vengeance. You have huge structures, huge wineries that are built on post and pillar. That is right off the bottom, a tremendous bit off the building. But I truly think that these things can be done in phases. I'm just here speaking as a citizen and part of, the Friends and here to help do fundraising for it. I feel it's a viable building. It looks very strong. It just needs to come up to be functional again. everything that has movement and life into it brings a house back to life. We have had several houses, one on Main Street, if I'm not mistaken, by the PG&E spot, I don't, over by the welding area. That was a historical home over there that was taken off the registry because people wanted to sell it, move it. And so it was not hard to take it off the historical registry. That has happened several times. And no harm, no foul. It doesn't, it's no sweat off anyone's back to make it a historical designation. It just unties a lot of hands in order to give funding to help bring it up to fruition. That's all I have to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Roger Farrell-Mathias.
Good evening, Roger Fowler Tice. I'm here for the Oregon City Parks Foundation. The Buena Vista, Friends of the Buena Vista Club are part of the Oregon City Parks Foundation now. We have, that, which means that we will have access to unlimited grants to help with this, besides what the city parks is able to get. We fully support this project. As part of our scope, our original vision was to advocate for parks, trails, green spaces, and historical sites. And that's our intention to go forward doing that. And this, in our opinion, this 1890s building is a significant piece of Oregon City. And having visited recently Port Townsend, Washington, I was totally impressed with a population 1/3 of ours, and they are redoing their whole downtown, and it's just so impressive. I wish some of you would be able to get up there and see what they're doing, and it's just we feel strong. I feel strongly that we need to keep everything we can keep in this city, and this building is one of them. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor?
Any additional public comment? Okay. Commissioner McGriff?
Yes, the other thing that wasn't added to this is that at some point in time, I know the Parks Department is planning to do a master plan for Atkinson Park. This house is an integral part of the master planning for Buena Vista Clubhouse and the park, and its recognition of its significance and its tie to Atkinson and everything else about Oregon City history. I mean, I guess what I'm asking is that obviously we are not hearing what Karen said, and there's much more history that she didn't mention about why they formed in the first place to fill that gully. But this is something that is significant to our community, and I wouldn't be so invested in it if I didn't feel that it was part of what Oregon City stands for. And I will say this, I am invested in it. I feel very committed to this project. I'm devoting blood, sweat, and tears to this project, and I'm just hoping for a little bit of support from this commission to move this project forward, because again, Rocky keeps beating on the dead horse. We did this to ourselves. So let's just correct the mistake. This is not the Ermatinger House. It's not the same thing. It's a similar project, but it is not the same type of a project. And again, if we hadn't, as a commission, I don't know what authorization there was back 5 years ago to take everything out of the house, to gut it before it came to the commission.
There wasn't.
To get approval. So let's not do this again. Let's take care of the stuff that we already have. We've got people who are willing to put in their time and money and energy and doing pro bono work for us on behalf of the community.
Commissioner Smith, final word?
When we take this vote, I want the people sitting in the audience to watch very closely what happens. And if this vote doesn't go through, do not let that stop you. Work harder, because the only thing better than not having the city commission support its own buildings is to say it's not important. And then to have the public come back a couple years later and say, we did your job. how embarrassing that's gonna be. But I can't wait to see it. Call for the vote.
So one final word for me, and that is that along with some more accurate cost estimates about what exactly it is we want to do, I'd also like to see a business plan that shows how this is going to pencil as far as, paying for itself. It has to at least, at the very minimum, has to pay all of its utilities, has to pay for the staffing that's going to operate it, and all those things. And so far, we're only seeing one side of the equation. We're not seeing the revenue side of the equation. So I haven't seen any numbers on what that might look like. I know for a long time it was pretty much totally unused. The last time I remember being in a meeting there was probably in the late 70s. I was part of the junior, Chamber of Commerce, the JCs, and we met there a few times. Beyond that, I have to be responsible about how we spend our money. And until I have a better idea of what the costs are going to be and what the revenue is going to be, I can't support it at this time.
Call for the vote.
Can I make one comment?
Yes.
I was actually following the staff report, and I did not believe that we were having a vote about the National Historic Register or anything like that.
Doesn't matter, that's the motion.
Your staff report says that you're seeking direction from us. In prior meetings, we had a document that laid out all the details of the local registration versus national registration and going through all of that. I guess I would like to review that again, and that's part of the reason that I'm gonna vote the way that I vote, but I guess maybe you didn't know that it was going to come, that vote was going to come up here, because I feel like we're in two different areas. I feel like what staff's requesting and what's happening up here is two different things, and so I just want to be clear about that.
Okay, so
I didn't make.
Sometimes the motions that are made by commissioners don't have anything to do with the agenda. And I called for the vote, I don't know how long ago, and was more than willing to listen to the discussion. And I could have called for the vote and kept doing that, but I let everyone speak. Let's take the vote.
Well, I'd like to get back to Rachel's question as well, even though I seconded your motion.
actually, the question's been called.
Okay, then let's vote.
It was called a long time ago.
Commissioner Rocky Smith,
Aye.
Commissioner Denise McGriff,
Aye.
Commissioner Rachel Lyle Smith,
No.
Commissioner Frank O'Donnell,
No.
Mayor Dan Holliday.
No.
So then back to Rachel's question, Mr. Mayor.
Yes.
What I have a concern about is that every time the staff comes up with a proposal that tries to meet what the commission asked for at that particular time, we keep getting more stuff added on. What we're trying to do, the Friends Group is trying to do, is to refine some of the cost estimates so that we have at least an idea of what it might cost if there was no object, money was no object. Since I've been on this commission a very, very short time, I've seen us spend some money on some things that, well, we've been spending money on other things. I think we are being fiscally prudent by looking at what Mr. Lewis has provided and what Mr. Island has provided, because we have a building that we already own that we're supposed to already be taking care of. So if there's, let's give him some direction on where he needs to go with what he already has and not keep dumping more things on it. So
Okay.
we have other things that we've looked at, and we're not asking other people for revenue generating things. We're not asking them all of that. We have some information from the past that we know that it did generate income.
Okay, this discussion is over, and we're moving on to
So we're
item.
not going to give him any further direction?
I think Mr. Lewis sat through and listened to everything we had to say, and Mr. Conkle did as well, and they can come back with,
They have no direction to come back.
I would like
It's
to
not
hear
clear
what
to
the-
me what they wanted. They just said staff is seeking direction, but you have not asked us specific, what do you want? Do you want us to I
So
would like
the-
more information from staff.
We had a discussion the last time about trying to reconcile the cost estimate that Mr. Island had put together. And because there was a concern that what was required from both scopes of work did not match up. So we worked to consolidate those to come back. And we were asked to come back with cost estimates to make a decision on whether the commission wanted to move forward with restoring the building or not. Are we going to start to dedicate those funds? That was what we were told was missing, was being able to compare apples to apples on a cost estimate. So we need direction, whether you would, what would you like us to do with this building at this point?
2 of us told you, so it has to come from these 3.
No, I didn't tell him specifically.
Well, we made an effort
Well,
to
that
try
was,
to
that
give
was that
direction.
specific issue. That was not my specific
Right.
request.
Well,
I guess,
you can make
if
one.
you want to ask me what I would like, is that I think Todd Island's estimates are more realistic. I would like to see not an estimate from ACC, even though, like I said, I like them, I've used them. I thought that their estimate was not based on the same things that the estimate that the other firm looked at. So to me, they're not apples to apples.
Yeah.
This other estimate is picking the granite countertops, and what we're trying to do over here is look at, okay, let's see if we can do Corian or Formica, to use an example. So what I would like to see is something that's more realistic from a construction company or another architect, not an estimating company, because again, I've used them, their estimates are always off the hook, always way over. And somewhere there's a number in between that. That's what I would like. I would like to be able to move this project a little forward by getting some additional money to match some money that the city might be able to give to this, because again, we own it, we screwed up. So please, let's just fix this a little bit at a time and let the public do their magic. So that's what I want.
To be honest, to a certain extent, I agree with Commissioner McGriff. The fact is that we still don't, the people who really can tell us what it's going to cost are the people that actually do it. So we still don't have any kind of an estimate from a construction company of any kind. And I think we ought to get at least 1 or 2 from an actual construction company that's actually doing work in this environment in this year. Because we all know, just from the police facility, that costs have gone up dramatically because literally everybody is working. So what used to be, little guys scraping for scraps, they aren't anymore. Everybody's busy. And that just means costs go up. So I guess if there's any direction for me would be, let's go back, let's have a strict schedule of the things that we want to have done, and then have that bid out or estimated at least by at least a couple of actual construction companies.
I will say that with the original drawings that Todd produced for us, and he did produce some refined drawings, which is what we used for the cost estimation, we did reach out to firms and had them come and give, again, rough estimates. As we were going through this process, we reached out to a number of firms to ask them to give estimates, and they were unwilling. As you stated, the construction industry currently is booming. It's very difficult to get responsiveness from firms to come out during their busy season. We can definitely, if that's the wish of the commission, go down that route. I think as we had conversations with firms, they were asking for more specificity in a actual construction document package, which would include all of the cut sheets, which would include, a full design of what would be built out. There would be costs to survey the property. There would be, costs incurred by Mr. Island to produce the CD set. If that's the wish of the commission, we can start going down that route. I would just say that it's going to be expensive, no matter what we do with this property, to open it up as a public building. Maybe I would suggest that we have some time for the Friends Group to begin trying to find grant opportunities. I did have a brief conversation with the county. They have a CDBG Community Development Block Grant opportunity that's opening up in November. And they thought this could be a project that might have an opportunity for that grant. We would know for sure by March whether or not that would be successful, and that could be used as a match for the Friends Group to go after additional grants to match with that grant. But we, again, that would be of no cost. We're currently, the house is sitting, there wouldn't be a ton of staff time dedicated to continuing to reach out to firms or to dig in further on the construction document set until we know if we would be successful with the CDBG grant, which again would be a good chunk of the estimates that you saw on the PowerPoint presentation.
Okay,
I'd like to speak.
go ahead, Commissioner O'Donnell.
So here's my final words. Apparently, there's no middle ground here. You know, I proposed it as a historical artifact, which Mr. Roberts tells me would be appreciably less money. I'm thinking people walk through and see what it was. Apparently, that's not a consideration. The only consideration exists somewhere between tear it down and make it a viable meeting place. Other than that, I said there's two questions that would help me. And a clear answer, does any historical designation limit the city's options in any way? Straightforward question. And second, those that are actively pursuing grants, if you could enumerate grants and their value, potential value, you know, can you get 10,000? Can you get 200,000? You know, that would be helpful to me also. And I'll leave, those are my final comments for the evening.
Commissioner Smith.
Just a question. What was the last estimate to demolish the building?
I think around 20,000.
I thought it was a lot more than that, but there's an expense either way, but.
Well, Mr. Lewis, many of us in the community, including myself, have contacts with construction firms, and maybe we can be more persuasive than you and your staff have been by making those contacts. I know Todd knows people, I know people. So I think we can get back with you and work with you to find some firms that might be more responsive based on the sets of information that we have today. And I would be willing to put some time into that with you.
Is staff okay? Can we move on?
We still don't
Well,
get
it's the
direction.
commission. I mean, so we're going to work with the Friends Group to try to get a construction estimate on the building.
Yeah, at least a couple.
Based
So we
on the
have,
documents we have now, not.
yeah.
And is that,
And to clarify one thing, Mr. Roberts, to set it up as Commissioner O'Donnell talked about and have it be a historical artifact, that would preclude people from actually going into the building, right?
Not necessarily. They could still go through the building.
But would you have to have working bathrooms?
No.
Okay.
That's what I'm talking about.
So
That's the solution.
If I could,
Would accessibility be?
One at a time here.
so if, the direction for listening to the conversation, the direction for the estimates would be based on what your vision is for the building. Excuse me. If it wasn't a meeting place, then there's a lot more to it. If it's an exhibit, for somebody to walk through, it's a lot less. So it's kind of what do you want? And that's what you'll get the estimates for.
Save a building that doesn't make a penny. Brilliant idea.
Okay, well, hopefully you guys have enough information because we're moving on at this point. I'm going to item 7A, 19-480, the guaranteed maximum price and construction for the police municipal court facility, also known as Robert Lidke Public Safety Building. Mr. Chief Band.
Evening, Mayor, Commission. I'm going to keep this fairly brief. I do not know what questions you might have about it, so just any that you do, let me know once I'm done just kind of initially talking. So we had a initial contract with our construction company to help us design with the architect our building. And so they've been working with us from the start. We started, as you know, with a 40,000-foot building. And so we've been going through a very laborious process of getting what was a 40,000-foot building to match what our targeted guaranteed maximum price, which is what this is of $18 million. There have been some changes. We're down to 33,800 feet. As you know, we had to remove a public meeting space. We can still utilize aspects of the courthouse and commission chambers for some public meeting space, but that and a bunch of other changes we've made to the building. But at the end of the day, we're very confident through this process of literally looking at every dime we're spending, that that our design and our budget fit what is going to really hit the community expectation, our employees' expectation, and the expectations and really serve victims and people who are coming to do business with the police department. You might wonder what is a guaranteed maximum price. If you hear construction budget referred to as a hard cost and soft cost, this is the hard cost. Soft costs are things like SDCs, permitting fees, what we pay our project manager, the architect. And so this is the second part of the contract with the construction company. This is the guaranteed price that we have with them that they're agreeing to. There's only one little thing, one thing about the contract. Mr. Kabaisman has reviewed this. Our project management firm has also looked at the contract. This contract is much like the one that we had with the library. It's the same construction company and the same type of process. There's only one little thing that might come up later. I have no idea. There's something called the corporate activity tax that was passed, signed by the governor in May 16th. It basically taxes projects over $1 million, just over 0.5%. So that'd be a little over $100,000. They're in the process of coming up with the rules for that. It's not going to be affect the tax year until 2020, January of 2020. I reached out to get a little bit of clarification from the Oregon Department of Revenue. They said cities are exempt, but I don't know if construction companies doing business for cities are exempt. So that is $100,000 that we're not exactly sure how that's going to wash out down the road, but I think we're probably going to be able to take care of that.
But I could take that out of his bonus.
I'm fine with that. I don't know if he would vote yes for that. But if you have any questions or anything, let me know. I'd be happy to answer them about the project or about this. And with that, I'm recommending that you approve this contract.
The representative from PNC is here if we, no?
Plan B.
He's not. Oh.
Plan B, Mr. Mulrooney is our project manager.
So if you have any questions as far as project management, contracts, any questions?
I have none.
Is there a motion?
Sure. Motion to approve 19-480, the guaranteed maximum price and construction of the police and municipal courts facility.
Seconded.
Further discussion? Call a roll.
Commissioner Rocky Smith,
Aye.
Commissioner Denise McGriff,
Aye.
Commissioner Rachel Lyle Smith,
Aye.
Commissioner Frank O'Donnell,
Aye.
Mayor Dan Holliday.
Aye. Okay, now back to the agenda. So we're now at item 6A, PC 19-082, first reading of ordinance number 19-1009, amending the Oregon City Municipal Code, Chapter 17.40, Historic Overlay District. Ms. Turway.
Thank you very much. The city adopted historic review board policies to allow homeowners of historic buildings to make selective minor improvements without a large cost or process of review. And so this proposal tonight will amend Chapter 1740 of our Oregon City Municipal Code to clarify what the process of that historic review board policy ought to be. Right now, we have two conflicting chapters. When we were last here, the commission provided direction to staff to amend some of that language. Kelly Reed is the planner here with the city to tell you a little bit more.
Thank you, Mayor and Commissioners. Kelly Reed, planner. Last meeting, we received direction from you to revise the code amendment to clarify that all HRB policy changes should be adopted by the city commission by resolution. So we have made that change in the redlined code amendment. One other change that we made was based on a public comment at the last meeting regarding the definition in Chapter 1704 of new construction. For the purposes of Chapter 1740, when we're talking about historic review of new construction. And so we've very lightly clarified that definition to make it explicitly clear that new construction includes a new building on a vacant lot,
Okay.
as well as a 30% addition to a existing building.
Okay, we have one public comment, Jim Nocita?
Should we open the public hearing?
Oh, there we go. I'll open the public hearing. We're at staff report, Mr. Nocita.
Good evening, Jim Nacita. I live in Oregon City. Kelly, I'm sorry. Katie, would it be possible to project the the Exhibit A, which is the redlined amended version of the code onto the screen, into the commissioner's monitors? So,
Yeah, I don't think. I can get it fast enough.
So I'd like to draw the commissioner's attention to subsection K, which is completely stricken from the code. And the reason I want to draw it to your attention, because I think it's very important for another matter that's before the commission now, which you've directed to the staff to bring back for reconsideration, which was the house at 302 3rd Avenue in Kenema with the fence that's both on the property and in the right-of-way. I wrote comment on that agenda item that I just want to reinforce here. I wrote in the comment for that file that unlike what was stated during the hearing, there is a code in place that predates that fence. And because there's two different files, it may not have sunk in, but what I pointed out was precisely this subsection K. So subsection K says the following exterior alterations may be made subject to the administrative procedures as outlined below. And the first line there is construction of fences on historic sites. This is precisely the code from 1985 that predates the fence at 302 3rd Avenue. And if you delete this, you are going to delete your own authority to address that issue. So I would seriously recommend that you not delete subsection K, at least not right now. I would set this aside so you still have the authority of that first line that says construction of fences on historic sites, because that's your authority that predates that fence. And if you delete it, you're just not going to be able to, address that matter. And there may be other instances in Kenema that are similarly situated. I would really strongly recommend that you leave this in place until you've addressed that matter and any similar situations that may or may not exist in Kenema. Thank you.
Mr. Nacita, historic sites being the entire Kenema district, whether it's public or private property?
No. No, this, as I read this just says, this is only the part of 302, this would only be the part on 302 3rd Avenue that's on private property. There's another provision from 1985 that I mentioned in the comment for that file that addresses the public right-of-way. That is not being proposed for any change. It's in the definition of major public improvement.
Okay.
And that's not going to be deleted, so you'll still have that authority. I just want to give you a heads up not to,
Okay, thank you. So here's the question I have, Carrie. I assume that you've worked with staff on the language for this. Are we losing any authority whatsoever in this new code?
The question that Mr. Nissi is raising is whether or not the Ganong fence is a lawful non-conforming use. In other words, when it was constructed, were there regulations in place that would have required land use review or prohibited it from being there? That's the question he's raising. It has nothing to do with what regulations are on the books today. And what we're proposing to delete are procedures that don't comply with state law today.
Okay.
And we've consolidated all the procedures into 1750. So the reason why it doesn't make sense for us to have this is, one, it doesn't comply with state law. Two, 1750 covers the things that do comply with state law. So that's why we're asking to delete it. The fence policies, for a practical matter, that this refers to are the fence policies that the HRB reviewed and you all adopted a resolution at your last meeting to affirm.
Okay. So is there any further discussion on this item?
Well, I guess I would say that he's presented some very compelling evidence, and I'm still not convinced that we're not deleting something that we shouldn't be deleting. So how does it not comply with state law? So tell me how
All
it
right.
still means the same thing.
All right. What subsection K says, it says is that there will be an administrative procedure that will address fences and exterior alterations for incompatible design. And then it provides for notice, and it says that the notice will be given within 10 days of the issuance of the notice, any person who has received personal notice pursuant to subsection 1 of this subsection who demonstrates sufficient interest may request a hearing. That does not comply with 197763.
Okay, so how do we make it comply with 197663, but keep the intent of what that says?
Okay, well, because 197763 says we give notice
Yes, I
21 days, 20 days, 14 days in advance,
14
which is
days.
what our code says we do.
Right.
Under our current code, if you are doing any new construction, you have to comply with 1750, the type 3 HRB review. So we get 197763 compliance that way. The reason why we have these HRB policies is to provide an expedited type 1 clear and objective review for fences. The fence policies that were in place back when this was adopted or before the current ones that are proposed, they were discretionary. We couldn't have those policies and have it be a type 1 review. So the HRB made a policy choice that we wanted to still provide a de minimis exclusion for certain types of activities that that comply with the intent of the historic district. That's why certain types of fences are exempt from review. We don't need to have 10-day notice and a right for a hearing if the policies are clear and objective. There's no point, because the types of policies that we've identified are certain types of fences, and there's pictures of them, and we're gonna know when it's that. And if we don't know that it's that, and we have to do discretionary review, we're gonna go through the 1750 type 3 review. So this notice and hearing opportunity is superfluous.
Okay,
Sorry to be complicated.
sorry.
No, you're not being
Is there a
complicated.
motion?
with you.
So I actually have a follow-up question, if I may, please.
Go ahead.
So my question was, how do we make that particular provision comply? Do we add something additional to the policy for fences that incorporate, not the 10-day, because I know it's 14 days. Obviously, I know that better than I know many other things in my life. What I'm concerned about is that if this person raised it, are there other people who have raised this issue but haven't come here before tonight? And it's like, was this section looked at by staff before they were proposing to delete it? Because again, in Kenema, which we're talking about, again, because fences in McLaughlin, I mean, if somebody took down a big section of fence, I wouldn't consider that maintenance if there was some other issue. Kenema, there's not really a whole lot of discretion. Your fence gets reviewed regardless. So I want to make sure there's clear and objective standards that if you're taking down 2 feet or a foot of your fence, that might be maintenance. If you're taking down a huge section of your fence, that is not to me maintenance. You're rebuilding the whole thing. So how do we avoid getting into a jam, and make sure that we are following the policies for fences in both districts.
So, Carrie, are we?
Are we following the policies?
Yeah.
Yes,
And this code update supports those policies?
yes.
Okay.
The way to give more process, Commissioner McGriff, would be to not have policies that allow for type 1 review. We can provide type 3 review for every activity that happens in a historic district and not have policies. We can do that. And then there will be 1750, 197, 763 procedures applicable to every fence in the historic district. And we can make that the policy if that's what you want it to be. But that's not what we've proposed here.
Okay, so I'm not an expert in land use. I'm not an attorney. And I don't expect us to be that. I think we hire staff and we hire our city attorney to give us make the proper papers and then give us the right advice and explain what's going on. So Ms. Richter, you're telling me that with this code update, we have all the authority we need to regulate fencing and other things in Kenema?
Or McLaughlin.
We
Or
will,
Goffin.
we will, through the policies, regulate fences the way the policies provide.
Okay, thank you.
Can I make a comment?
Go ahead.
I think throughout this process, through the last few meetings we've had, we've realized some issues that are in some current policies that we need to revisit. This is cleaning up procedure, and I think the next step would be to go back and fix what happens in right-of-way areas, if there's any policy change. I mean, because that sounds like that's more of a policy change that we need to revisit in order to maybe fix some of these things
I
that
actually
came
like
up.
your idea.
Well, and let
Isn't
me
that
follow
correct?
up with that. Let me follow,
Yeah.
because I should have mentioned this earlier. The question of repair and maintenance, that is not in the policies. That's a question of the code. And that, maybe needs some cleanup. The guideline suggestion that Mr. Nacita raised in an email, that's beyond the scope of this project too. And my understanding is staff would like to revisit those guidelines after we get the comprehensive plan potentially, behind us. And what's important about that from a planning perspective is we need the comprehensive plan to identify how we want to prioritize preservation, then we implement it through code amendment. And that's kind of how it's supposed to roll out in a perfect world where we have all kinds of time.
Okay. Is there a motion?
I have one more question for our attorney.
Okay.
Can we add to that policy that there will be review by staff of fences in any right-of-way?
The provisions before you this evening are just for the code amendments, not for the HRB policies, which the commission approved a few weeks ago. So these are just looking at the policies of how we implement, procedures of how we implement the policies, but,
Can we go back and add it?
We can always, we always have the
Revisit,
opportunity to modify something. or-
Okay.
yeah, this provision would allow the city commission to adopt policies by resolution before, although they'd have to go to HRB before that.
Okay.
As far as I know, there were two
Right.
policy issues that we wanted to revisit, the in right-of-way stuff. And the other one was, Commissioner McGriff, you brought up about, these fences are good, these fences are not, but then there was this weird exception
Right.
rule that I was like, well, they either are, they aren't. And
Right,
I-
that's my opinion. They
There
either
was
are or they
that little scenario there that seemed a little questionable, so I think there were two policy type things to revisit.
But that's something we
But
can
that's a
do
different-
at a later
yes,
date.
yes.
This is, to me, this is housekeeping. And we've already spent way more
Yes.
time on it than we should have.
Laura, isn't it true any new fences or any new facilities in the public right of way? I mean, we're bringing back to you encroachments on anything new, whether it's a fence or a wall. We're talking, so as of today, that's what you're asking for, Denise, right? Is can we review those things? Yes, we can review those things today if it's new.
I don't want it to just be new.
Oh, so you want us to go back and look at age-old?
That's a different discussion that I can have with you.
Well, I know, but that,
Yeah.
if you're asking to add, that's a bigger difference.
Yeah, it is.
Is it Russian?
Motion to approve PC 19-082, first reading of ordinance number 19-1009, amending the Oregon City Municipal Code, Chapter 17.40, Historic Overlay District.
Or a second? Okay, so what do you want to do? What is it that you want fixed in this so that, are we just not doing any regular business tonight? Because I'm happy to go home.
I'm voting no because there's someone who wants to speak, and if you're not gonna allow them to speak, I'm voting no.
Okay, and the reason I'm not allowing a person to speak is because I'm not gonna have two
Well, then-
attorneys arguing over some arcane legal
Okay,
thing.
then sit and wait for a second.
Okay, we'll move on.
Well, I'll second it.
You'll
for-
second it?
Yes,
Okay,
for the purposes of getting it off, moving it off.
is there further discussion?
Nope.
Call the roll.
Wait, let me do the
Oh,
first reading,
go ahead.
sorry.
Second to do what?
Sorry, ordinance number 19-1009, an ordinance of the City of Oregon City amending the Oregon City Municipal Code, Title 1740, Historic Overlay District.
Call roll.
Commissioner Rocky Smith,
No.
Commissioner Denise McGriff,
Abstain.
Commissioner Rachel Lyles Smith. Aye. Commissioner Frank O'Donnell,
No.
Mayor Dan Holliday.
Aye. So, I guess
Motion fails.
some of these commissioners are gonna have to give you some ideas about what's wrong with this. But I prefer you do it offline, so we're gonna move on. Last thing we have on the regular agenda is the second reading of ordinance number 19-1012, 20-mile-per-hour speed limit policy in the Kenema neighborhood.
So thank you for taking the second reading. It is the second reading. The only thing I really want to mention is we continue to list this, I see, as a pilot program. Again, so we're not intending to remove these once in place. We feel like we've done as asked by the commission, that make sure we've got support of this by the neighborhood, and we do have neighborhood support for this. And then last but not least is we think we've heard loud and clear that it's not something that this commission in particular wants to pursue citywide, but in this pocket neighborhood that's kind of removed from everything else, you feel pretty supportive of that.
I
So-
would not agree with that. I would be interested in talking about it in other parts of the city, so you have my support to look at this in other parts of the city.
Okay.
Me too.
Well,
And she said me too.
Me too.
okay.
So I'd like to make a motion. I'd like to move that we adopt ordinance 19-1012, an ordinance of the City of Oregon City establishing a 20-mile-an-hour speed limit on 3rd Avenue, 4th Avenue, 5th Avenue, Aberson Street, McLaughlin Boulevard to 3rd Avenue, Jerome Street, McLaughlin Boulevard to 3rd Avenue, Miller Street, McLaughlin Boulevard to 3rd Avenue, and 4th Street to 5th Street, Hedges, McLaughlin Boulevard to 3rd Avenue, and Ganong, and all located within the Kenema neighborhood.
Second.
Further discussion? Carrie?
Ordinance number 19-1012, an ordinance of the City of Oregon City establishing a 20-mile-per-hour speed limit on 3rd Avenue, 4th Avenue, 5th Avenue, Apperson Street, McLaughlin Boulevard to 3rd Avenue, Jerome Street, McLaughlin Boulevard to 3rd Avenue, Miller Street, McLaughlin Boulevard to 3rd Avenue, and 4th Street to 5th Street. Hedges Street, McLaughlin Boulevard to 3rd Avenue, and Ganong Street, all located within the Kenema neighborhood.
Call roll.
Commissioner Rocky Smith,
Aye.
Commissioner Denise McGriff,
Aye.
Commissioner Rachel Lyles Smith. Aye. Commissioner Frank O'Donnell.
Aye.
Mayor Dan Holliday.
Aye. Okay, everybody okay with the consent agenda?
I would so move.
Second.
Call roll.
Commissioner Rocky Smith,
Aye.
Commissioner Denise McGriff,
Aye.
Commissioner Rachel Lyles Smith. Aye. Commissioner Frank O'Donnell.
Aye.
Mayor Dan Holliday.
Aye. Mr. Manager, got anything for us?
Just a quick reminder, tomorrow night, 5:30 at the end of the Oregon Trail, Oregon City Volunteer Recognition in conjunction with the concert in the park. 175th celebrations on Saturday, August 24th, 10 a.m. to 9:15 p.m. at end of the Oregon Trail. So hopefully you'll all be able to come out to that. And just an update that we'll do our annual pool closure this year from September 1st to September 13th. That's all that I have for tonight.
Do we need to do anything for the volunteer do the commissioners need to do anything for the, did you ask us to, do you want us to do anything?
No, we stopped doing the serving. and
Oh, okay.
So we just, they're mingling, you got a
We're just
t-shirt.
mingling, okay.
Yeah. Any communications from the commission?
Not from me.
Commissioner Smith?
Just want to also remind people that Saturday is a celebration of the 175th anniversary of this very historic town. So there's a lot of events going on at the end of the Oregon Trail Interpretive Center. Speakers, events, music, laser light show, et cetera, et cetera. So I'll be down there all day, and hopefully everyone will go down there. Sunday, of course, is the Antique Fair, so it's a very busy weekend, lots of events going on.
Super busy weekend.
Commissioner McGriff?
Yes, I just want to report that we had our monthly meeting with the Downtown Oregon City Association, and I'm very pleased to report that they're making substantial progress on the MOU, and I think it'll be imminent any day, I hope. The other thing that the organization is engaged in is doing their planning calendar for 2020, and I have strongly recommended that they cut back on some of the things they're doing so that they can do the things that they really do well and kind of take out some of the superfluous things. But there's definitely going to be some, what I would call beverage walks coming up. I won't specify which beverages, but there'll be some beverage walks coming up involving delicious beverages. So watch for that. And something that they're going to be partnering with the city is John, help me out, it's the set aside parking space day on September 21st, where the parking space is set aside. It's some sort of, they said they were talking to you about it. Anyway, I wrote it down in my notes.
News to him.
Anyway, so.
Surprise.
Anyway, so surprise, John. So anyway, yes, there's going to be, they're looking at taking, it's something that's been going on all over the country, and I guess we got a grant for it to do something next year. You set aside a parking space and you redo it. They're looking at doing some sort of a fun activity in the parking space. Yeah, well. No, that's a waived encroachment permit because they're working with, it's called Parking Day. And basically you set aside a parking space and you show that a parking space can be doing something else. They're also very excited to continue working with the city on the shared parking downtown now that that ordinance has been approved, and they're working with the city with regard to signage. And they've been making the rounds to the property owners that are going to be participating. So it could potentially open up an additional, make my note here, some between about 50 plus parking spots downtown. And so it's one of the things that they're working on is to make sure that it's clear when you can park there and when you can't park there. So I was very excited about that. Also had my monthly meeting with and I'm going to get the name wrong too, the Willamette Falls Heritage and Landings Heritage Coalition. Anyway, they are going to be at the 75th anniversary party, 175th down at the Trail Center, so stop by. I got coerced into working at their booth in addition to the city booth. So come by and chat with them. They're working very hard on their presentations, and I'd say they're about 90% to getting the federal designation. Unfortunately, with what's going on in Washington DC, it looks like it's going to be in the next legislative session, but our entire delegation is completely supportive of it, which is all 5 of them, which is really great. So I'm very excited about that. And I haven't volunteered for anything else with them, so my time will be dedicated to the city of Oregon City.
Okay. The only thing I have is today I was invited to go on the canoe trip, which I couldn't do with the Grand Ron, but I did go to the luncheon afterwards, and Tony and Laura also were there. And just to report that the Grand Ron as a whole are very excited about being able to work with us in Oregon City on the redevelopment of the Blue Heron site. So with that, we're adjourned.
Tony, tell us about the canoe trip. How was it?
It was great.